We live in a world ruled by tyranny, where knowledge is suppressed and ignorance is glorified. A world where propaganda and misinformation travel the airways at the speed of lies. But in the midst of the violence and chaos, a great awakening is taking place. And as the media empires continue to collapse, a new network is forming. A network of truth, a network of courage, a network of awareness. Peace and greetings. You are now tuned into the Network of Awareness podcast radio station, where we examine current events, politics, health, finance, and topics of cultural relevance in America and throughout the world, while bringing you insightful interviews with guests that will both educate and inspire you. And now, your host of the Network of Awareness podcast radio station, Aura the Informationalist.
Just tell me what's happening to me in plain English without the mumbo jumbo.
My aura is a network full of awareness and gifts like Aura, the informationalist.
How you doing?
Peace and greetings, brothers and sisters from around the world. You're now tuned in to the Network of Awareness. This is the Network of Awareness. This is the spiritual fire mixed in with Truth Seekers Series. And I got a great guest that I'm going to bring on in just a moment. Welcome. And on this episode, we're going to talk a lot about health and our awareness of health, and having different types of ways to go about staying healthy. And it doesn't have to necessarily be the orthodox traditional ways. And the guest that I'm going to bring on is going to shed a lot of light on that today. So brothers and sisters, this is Aura the Informationalist, owner and founder of the Network of Awareness. And I want to welcome you to the Network of Awareness. Now, this will be also be available on YouTube and on all the listening platforms where podcasts are played. So with that being said, let me introduce our guest and give you a little bio about him before we get started. He's one of the most sought after teachers today. Yogi Aaron is trailblazing a new path in the world of yoga, known for his unorthodox perspectives on stretching and flexibility, and how both cause more harm than good. His teachings aim to help as many people as possible to live pain-free lives so that they can realize yoga's true intentions. He is the creator of the revolutionary approach to yoga, applied yoga anatomy plus muscle activation. It's called AYAMA, which is AYAMA. And the online platform, the Yogi Club, host of the Yogi Club podcast, Stop Streching, author of Autobiography of a Naked Yogi, and his new book, Stop Streching, a new yogic approach to master your body and live pain-free, and is the co-owner of the Blue Osa Yoga Retreat and Spa in Costa Rica. So brothers and sisters, we got somebody in Costa Rica listening. We got our Costa Rica listeners. So you got one of your very own that's over there right now. And he leads the yoga club. He's a yoga teacher, training immersions year round to students from all across the globe. So let's bring him on to the show. And if you want to unmute yourself, brother. Welcome to the show, Yogi Aaron.
Thank you so much for having me here, Aura.
You're very welcome. And sorry for the for the lackluster introduction that I gave. Usually I got a little bit more energy, but like you, I'm dealing with a little bit of allergies, but we're going to make it happen. Sometimes when we have these adversities, it leads for a really great show, you know?
Absolutely.
So that's how I look at it. But yeah, if you can just let the listeners know how you even got into yoga, because it is something very popular here in the United States. Now, you are originally from the United States, right?
I'm actually from Canada, Vancouver,
Oh,
Canada. Yeah,
no
but
wonder.
I lived in New York for 10 years. And then during that time, around 2010, I moved to Costa Rica to open up Blue Osa.
We have a lot of Canadian listeners. Always appreciate the Canadians. You know, it's interesting. I never met a Canadian I didn't like, and Canadians remind me of Ohioans. So people that live in Ohio, I get along with very well. They're some of the nicest people I ever meet. And for some reason, they remind me of people from Canada. I don't know why.
Well, people up there tend to be a little bit more, I guess, go out of their way to be nice. I have a friend from Minnesota actually visiting me right now. And we were just talking about the way Minnesotans drive, and they're so like gracious and slower moving, slower paced. And Canadians tend to be like that. We're just, we just kind of like slow down and enjoy life a little bit more.
So where are you from originally in Canada?
Vancouver.
Okay.
Yeah. That's actually where I started my yoga journey. As going to your question, the age of 18, I was very active, like probably a lot of 18-year-old boys. And I, was into snowshoeing. I went to school where we snowshoed, dog sled. I cross-country ran, trail ran, volleyball, ice hockey, you name it. And by the time I was 18, I just started noticing my body just tightening up. And like a lot of people, I thought, well, I want to stretch, so why not turn to yoga? So I kind of went to the gym to do my workouts and then went to yoga class to quote unquote stretch.
Okay. And what did because I noticed that people that do yoga, they tend to look a lot younger as they get older.
Yes.
So they age well, and I'm pretty sure it has to do something with the yoga. So,
well, I think that there's a few things, and it's funny that you just said that, because if you ask most people why you should stretch, and when I created my podcast, which is really more of a podcast series, it's an 8-part series, taking people through the journey of what yoga is and why they should stop stretching. But when you ask people, as we did in the podcast, why you should stretch, the number one reason came back is you're more healthy and you look younger. So it's kind of like this fountain of youth. And I have a couple of theories about why people might look more healthier, especially if they do a lot of quote unquote stretching or are in yoga. And one of them is just because when you're doing a practice of yoga, you tend to... Doing this kind of practices does something within your mind to kind of draw you more towards a healthier lifestyle. Like, when people start doing yoga, for example, in a very short amount of time, if they're a smoker, a lot of times they quit smoking. If they're, eating unhealthy food, they stop eating unhealthy food. They're like, oh, I really want to take care of my body. And I think that part of that, there's a few reasons for that, but one is that the nature of the yoga practice gets us to fully inhabit our body. And when we fully inhabit ourselves, we want to take better care of ourselves. So I think that there's this natural inclination for people to just start eating better, start sleeping properly, start watching less, news, as you did in your intro, talking about all of the news, industries, and all of that kind of stuff just kind of plagues our system and creates more stress. And so if we can, quite frankly, I don't think enough is spoken out in sort of the public domain about the damage of stress. And so if we can decrease stress, we're going to decrease our aging process dramatically.
Right. Now, we are going to get into how stretching is killing us, because I really want you to expound on that a lot, because that's one of the reasons why I brought you on the show. Because when you and I first started talking about this, I was like, wow, it's amazing. I didn't realize that, because being in sports myself when I was younger, especially in track, it's like you better stretch or you're going to catch a hamstring or something like that, right?
Yes.
But before we get into that, can you let the listeners know when you first got into yoga, what was, if you want to say like at least one thing, or if you have several, but what was that one thing that really like got you hooked to where you noticed that it did something for your life personally that changed your life from there on out? Because people say that yoga changed their life. A lot of people say that jiu-jitsu does the same thing.
Yeah.
When they do Brazilian jiu-jitsu or whatever, and they start doing it, it transforms their life. So what was that one thing that transformed your life, that you gained this whole new passion and purpose, obviously, for doing yoga? Can you share that with the listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as a kid, I suffered terribly from ADD, attention deficit disorder. I always had a problem focusing. In fact, my parents were so concerned about me when I was a kid growing up. They had me tested numerous times, and hearing tests, attention tests. They almost sent me to a school for kids with special needs. And I look back at that so ironically, because I think that parents just need to chill the F out when it comes to their kids. Because I mean, I probably would have been voted in school like least successful, least likely to succeed. And now I look back at all my classmates, and I probably am the one that succeeded, definitely.
Absolutely.
At the top of the list.
And you probably would have got drugged the hell up too, with Ritalin and all types of ADHD drugs and antidepressants and all, who knows?
Yeah, there's a lot of things I'm very thankful for that I didn't grow up in the world that we are in right now, but that's definitely at the top of the list. And so when I got into yoga, though, at this point, by the time I got into yoga, I had a better sense of who I was as a person and as an individual at the age of 18. But as the time started passing and as I started doing more and more yoga, which, for all intents and purposes, yoga is a discipline. So you mentioned jiu-jitsu. And I think that anytime we do kind of a disciplined practice that involves breathing, conscious breathing, it has a profound effect on our mind and on our consciousness. And slowly I started to notice that I was able to focus more. I was able to redirect or harness my mind. And I don't think that I was ever really taught how to concentrate my mind. I was always scolded to pay attention in school, coming back to that story, but I was never really taught how to harness the power of my mind in the way that yoga kind of taught me. And so I started noticing that I was able to concentrate more. And as I was able to concentrate more, I was able to succeed and do more things, and I was able to direct my energy. And that really kind of excited me. I never really thought that I would become a yoga teacher. I sort of fell into it completely by accident. But so that was the big thing that really changed for me. And then I met my teacher, one of my very first teachers, called Brian Kest. And I went and took class with Brian, and he was based in LA. And Brian, I saw him walking around the class, continuously talking. And his whole talk was basically how to bring yoga into our life. Like the practice that we were doing here translated into our life and how we could become better versions of ourselves. And I kind of felt like my whole sort of life had led to that one moment, to me to hear that and to witness that. And kind of like that big light bulb moment where I said, I can do this and be very good at it. So I did.
Hey,
so
you're very successful at it. You're very successful at it, right? I mean, you're doing it, and you're doing it outside the United States. So let's give you a round of applause for that, because
thank you.
The United Shenanigans of America is not really a place that's doing too well right now. But let me ask you the $1 million question. Let's get into it. Why is stretching killing us?
So as I said, I got into yoga because I was really tight, and I kind of just felt like I needed to stretch. I kind of observed, you kind of mentioned earlier, like people that do yoga seem younger. And I started to notice that people who were older but seemed more vibrant, more youthful, kind of had more mobility in their body. They seemed, more agile, where my grandparents were like stiff as boards by the time they turned 60. And I kind of was like, I think I need to kind of like stretch. So I got into yoga for stretching for that reason, to stay young. And I quickly hurt myself. There was a moment, it wasn't actually in yoga, it was in my regular life. I was doing something and my back seized up on me. And I was like 18, 19 at the time. And I thought, this is not good. Like, how is this happening to me? And as time went on, my back actually got worse and worse and worse. And it's kind of interesting, Aura, because I started to develop that belief, if you will, that I was a person who had a bad back. And so I would go into yoga classes and I would say to the teacher, I have a bad back. I can't do certain poses like cobra pose, for example. I said, I have to really back off. And now I know exactly why I had problems. But back then I didn't know. So I kind of like held off on all these postures that should be helping my back. And instead I tried to stretch more and more and more. And I didn't really, it would take me 25 years to kind of figure that out. And on that journey, a lot of other issues started popping up. Like I developed this searing neck pain that would shoot pain down my arm and into my fingertips. I had to hang up my hiking shoes by the age of 30, and then a whole bunch of other things that I kind of dealt with. And I ended up in a surgeon's office by the time I turned 45. And it was an orthopedic surgeon. And he said, there's a very good chance that we're going to have to do a spinal fusion in your lower back. And I was like, something has got to change, because I'm a quote unquote, master yoga teacher. I thought I had a really good idea of the human body. I was very conscious about my alignment. So when, yoga teachers might say to me like, well, maybe your alignment wasn't right. I said, alignment has nothing to do with it. The fact of the matter was I was hurting my body at a neuromuscular level and shutting down muscles in my body. So whenever we stretch, we shut down muscles, meaning that muscles lose their ability to contract and contract on demand. And that's not how you want to walk through life. You need to walk through life with a muscular system that's working properly. And so biomechanically, what happens is like imagine like you have a phone line connected from your brain to your muscles. And so the muscles are talking to the brain saying, hey, we need to contract. And the brain sends a message to the muscles saying, you've got to contract. Well, when we stretch and hold, elongate a muscle passively beyond its range of motion for an extended period of time, we then shut down the muscle, meaning that telephone line that's between the brain and the muscle, it's like taking a pair of gardening shears to that telephone line and cutting it. So the brain no longer knows where those muscles are. Now, that telephone line, becomes repaired over time. But if you keep doing enough stretching and add other stresses in your life to complicate the problems, then that connection just doesn't come back after a while. And that's what happened with me. And all of my back muscles, my glute muscles, nothing was working properly because I just overstretched everything.
So what should people avoid? Like, what's I have here, what's like the number one, or if you have several yoga poses people should avoid? And if you can also, it's like a two-part question because I have a tendency to compile questions into one. What is it that you discovered that works better than stretching in order to properly activate the muscles so that the muscles do not become isolated from doing what they're supposed to do?
So there's a lot to say. One of the things that you said earlier was that you were told to stretch. And so there's so much belief that we need to stretch. And a lot of people that are telling people to stretch have no idea. And I'm going to just say that like as a blanket statement. It's a very big judgmental statement, but I think there's a lot of truth to it. They just have no idea how the body works, how muscles work. And so part of what I'm trying to do is flip the script, especially with yoga, on what's, that people think that yoga equals stretching and flexibility. And it's not. It's really about, yoga is about creating inner stability, if you will. And from that stability, we cultivate peace of mind. And so what muscles are supposed to do, I mean, this is it in a nutshell. Like, it's a little bit more than this, but this is it in a nutshell. And this is not like new knowledge. This is something that we learned as children and somehow like in school, and then somehow we've just forgotten. So muscles have kind of two jobs. One is to move bones. So, we're both sitting. If we stand up, we need our muscles to, lift our skeleton up, and then they hold joints in place. So they support the joints of the body. And we have a lot of different joints, but the big ones, for examples, are the knees, the hips, our shoulder joints, and then the joints of the spine. And we have other joints, in the feet and in the arms. But the way that they work is by shortening. So muscles have to shorten in order to work properly. And that's how they stabilize joints. And so if you're constantly elongating a muscle, you're going against what that muscle should be doing. What you want to be doing is getting that muscle to shorten properly. So to kind of like the long way of answering your question is that we need to be focusing on practices that improve muscle function, not debilitate it. And definitely stretching and holding poses for more than 30 seconds isn't good. Going into poses passively is not very good. I'll give you an example of what passiveness means. So if you're lying on your back, and here's a common one, people want to stretch their hamstrings. So they lie on their back and say, for example, they bring their right leg up towards the sky. So they feel that tightness in their hamstring. And so what they'll do is grab the leg and pull the leg towards them, or they'll take a strap or something and bring it around their foot and try and bring their leg towards their body. So that's a passive stretch. And what you're going to do is end up shutting down all of these muscles. From an AYAMA perspective, what we want to do is actually improve the function of the muscles that are bringing the leg up towards the sky and then maybe towards the body. And the muscles are like, for example, the thigh muscles. So the thighs have to contract in order for the leg to come up. So what you want to do is improve that muscle function of the leg. And then you have complete accountability. No muscles are going to shut down. But once you grab the leg and pull it towards you, that's when you run into problems. So it's not really a big, kind of leap or switch. It is for some people, but it really isn't. It's just kind of flipping the script in your own mind about how we approach postures. You asked me what the number one posture to avoid would be child's pose.
What is it called again?
Child's pose.
Child's pose. And what does that entail?
So child's pose is a very common sort of yoga pose or resting pose, I guess, where you come onto your shins, your knees and your shins. You sit onto your heels and then you bring your forehead to the floor. It's just one of the worst poses that you can do because it shuts down like 4 or 5 different groups of muscles in your body, like major groups of muscles, your trunk flexors, your trunk extensors, your hip flexors, like all these muscles just stop working when you go into child's pose.
Interesting. You had said something about peace of mind that yoga gives you. Mm-hmm. It gives you stability and peace of mind. And that's something that for me is like oxygen.
Yes.
If I don't have peace of mind, it's like I'm dying.
Yeah.
And it's very important to me. And it's it's very important to a lot of my listeners as well, because we live in such a toxic world and a toxic society that is the narcissism is on a rise these days, right? So people need to find peace of mind, not from the world, but from within. So how is, especially this yoga that you teach, which is very unorthodox, how did you achieve achieve, what is it that you do? Because you say you don't stretch.
No.
And that if somebody was to stretch, they can't stretch for a long period of time, meaning it should be less than a 30-second pose to stretch. And until you, and this is, I'm assuming this, right? Until you transition into something else and don't keep adding, just basically making, if you do happen to stretch, let it be very, very brief. Is that accurate?
No, I would just say stop stretching altogether. I think the longer, if you are going to stretch, the longer you do it, the more damage you're going to do.
Let me give you
at a neuromuscular level, but I would just say stop stretching, period.
Okay.
I mean,
I'm going to take your advice.
Yeah.
Because one thing, I'm paying a lot of attention to this interview for myself as well, because I want to get into physical practices that's going to give me that peace of mind that I need to go about my day and to fulfill my purpose and do the things that I need to do for my life and for others. So let's say, for example, I go running. Instead of stretching, I should just start running?
It depends, but the short answer is yes. I mean, if you're going to, if you had a choice between stretching or not and just starting to run, I would say just start running. If you stretch, all your muscles are going to shut down, and then you're running with no muscles that are really working. So, in my book, which is titled Stop Stretching, I cite a lot of kind of scientific studies that were done. And there's been more and more that have been done in the last decade, and even just in the last few years. But they consistently show that with athletes who stretch. Now, we have to kind of define, when we're talking about athletes, we're talking about probably people somewhere between the age of 17 and 24, 25 years old. So, when you're that young, your body recovers very quickly. So just put a pin in that. So these studies consistently show that people who stretch, these athletes who stretch, their muscles do not return to full function for 30 minutes to 90 minutes. And that's not how you want to start running. You need, for example, if you're running, you want to make sure your glutes and your hip flexors are working. But as soon as you start stretching, you shut down those muscles. So these major stabilizing muscles in your body that should be propelling your effort or moving your effort, motivating your effort when you run are not working. And so then other muscles start having to compensate that should not be doing the job. And that's why you end up seeing a lot of people getting really hurt in running, and they think, oh, well, I need to stretch more, but then that actually starts to exacerbate the problem. If you're going to run, doing a few kind of isometrics is really useful. And so, for example, we're talking about that one pose, if you're on your back and you lift your leg up, you can do that standing as well. You grab onto a bar or something, maybe your car door, and you lift your right leg up and you just kind of hold it there for 3, 4, 5 seconds and then lower it back down, and just do that a few times. Do it on the other side a few times. I actually created a running series about a year ago, a series, and I kind of created 3 practices that each of them are about 8 minutes long. And it's just basically isometrics to get the main muscles of the body working that should be working, that you need to have to support your body as you're exercising.
Great. You think you can send me that running series?
Absolutely, for sure.
Definitely. Okay. Now let's talk about the things you talk about in your book briefly, because what I wanted to discuss, and so that we bring awareness to, is AYAMA, which stands for Applied Yoga Anatomy plus the Muscle Activation.
Yes.
So let's talk about AYAMA, which is this new philosophy and techniques that you have proven to work, and that's why you have these students, and you are a successful yoga teacher. So can you talk about this Applied Yoga Anatomy plus Muscle Activation, which is called AYAMA?
Yeah, absolutely. So something I kind of wanted to circle back to that you said earlier that you liked what I said was how yoga cultivates clarity of mind.
Right.
I think you and I can both agree that there's a lot of confusion in the world, especially right now. I mean, it's always been a problem, but it's definitely a big problem now.
Right. And that's why I do what I do.
And so for yoga, I mean, the basic tenet of yoga practice, there's a few, but this is probably at the top of the list, is getting stable and cultivating stability of mind. You know, if you think of the mind like an ocean, most people's, minds are like a torrent sea that's just, having a big storm and the waves are crashing and moving around. And what yoga says is that we actually want the mind to become as still as possible, like glass, and so that quiet, calm mind becomes at peace, and we become more at peace within ourselves. And from that place, we're able to see the world. And so part of the goal in that clarity of mind is be able to see the world as it really is, to be able to see reality as it really is. One of the practices that we do in my teacher trainings, the very first practice every single day, is a practice. It's a very old and ancient practice, not just in yoga, but in many spiritual traditions, actually, is candle gazing. And in candle gazing, it's just such a simple idea, but your only job is to watch the flame, for as many minutes as you. So in my trainings, we usually do it for about 15 minutes every single morning, the very first thing before sunrise. So you're kind of just, it's dark and you're just watching the flame. And you quickly start to see how your mind starts to create stories, like, oh, the flame is my friend. Oh, I'm connected to the flame and it's doing this stuff. And then, of course, many times you're watching the flame and your mind starts to go elsewhere. You're thinking about something else. Meanwhile, your eyes are wide open. You're watching the flame. So my point is that part of what yoga is about too is getting clarity of mind so that we can see reality as it really is. And a big part of that is getting stable. And that stability comes from two places. It comes from a few places, but from my lane or my wheelhouse, it comes from the breath. So starting to become more stable in the breath, and then stable in body. And this is where AYAMA plays into it. Applied yoga anatomy and muscle activation is that a lot of us don't have stability in body. And instability shows up, manifests as pain, as agitation, as inability to sit still, inability to carry yourself through life. And so I've made it a big part of my mission to help as many people as I can to start getting more stability in their body at the very least. Hopefully it'll transcend into other areas of their life. But what I've observed time and time again is that we can't fulfill life's purpose. We can't fulfill the purpose of our life if we're in pain. If we're in pain, we're constantly thinking about, how do I get out of pain?
Right. Yeah. A lot of my guests talk about that. The release of pain or wanting to get rid of it puts you in the fight or flight mode, right? And that's a very stressful ordeal. Because now you're not actually being present. You are focused on that stress, that induced stress, and how to get rid of it, which induces more stress, puts you in the fight or flight zone. And it actually does your whole body and your mind a disservice. So I completely agree with you, because that's something that's spoken about a lot here. But go ahead, continue. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. I appreciate those words. And I think what you just said is fight or flight. Like, so many of us are in fight or flight already. We turn on the news. Doesn't matter what news station it is. You turn on the news. Of course, unless it's the network awareness.
I was just going to say, because I tell my listeners, I say, don't watch the news. Let me watch it for you so I could dissect it and tell you all the shenanigans that are going on in it so you don't have to believe the nonsense. So It's funny because I watch the news for that reason. So I agree with you. Don't watch the news, brothers and sisters. Don't. Let me do it for you.
And all those things, it doesn't matter what political spectrum you fall on. It's all designed to give you stress and put you into that fight or flight, and social media is designed to keep you in fight or flight, unless you're looking at dog videos. Or cat video.
That is true, though. That is true, because I get a lot of joy watching. I'm not really a cat person, but I find those cat videos funny. But I am a dog person. I have a dog. Love my dog. Yeah. So,
well, I've actually trained social media to. This is my new thing. Is I've trained social media to believe that I like dog videos, which I do actually, and so it just shows me a lot of that. But when we're in that, we're already in this fight or flight. There's so much like fear. People have fear of like they're traveling somewhere. Are they going to make their flights? And it's really funny because, like, for example, like I travel a lot and I have not experienced one delay, one problem, one hiccup. But if you turn on the news, the airlines are a disaster. And so again, it comes back to reality. Like, what reality are we living in? Like, there's the reality that is projected from social media, from news, and then there's the reality of the reality. And so then we're in pain and, then we're stressed out from that pain, which is creating more like inflammation in our body. And this is kind of going back to what I said earlier about the damage of stress that's not talked about enough. It's like anytime we're stressed, we have inflammation. Inflammation deteriorates us at a very deep cellular level. And so part of what yoga does is help us to get out of that fight or flight situation and get us back into rest and digest, which is how we should be moving through life. And so where Y.A.M.A comes into it is starting to create more stability and more self-awareness, and I'm not talking about like, oh, I'm aware of myself, but I can really start to feel the muscles that are supporting my body and become acutely aware of them. And one of my teachers has a quote, and it basically says that everything becomes clear when we fully inhabit ourselves. And I love that. I think there's so much truth to that statement.
What's the teacher's name that said that?
Jenny Capular.
Let's give a round of applause for Jenny Capular. Because what Jenny's describing is insight. I didn't, when people say, oh, I have insight, it's like it's a perception of something. That's what they're really talking about. So that's not really true insight. True insight is actually being able to look within yourself completely, not just as you as the spiritual being having the physical experience, but actually look at yourself as the physical being having the physical experience as well, because you're looking at yourself from within and everything that goes on with the anatomy, which is a very, very highly advanced, sophisticated mechanism. Yeah. And the more you're in tune with that mechanism, like what Jenny said, you're gonna have a level of insight that most people around the world don't have because of what you were just alluding to with that fight or flight, that stress, those things that keep you distracted from that insight, and cultivating it to where you become a master at understanding who you are 360 degrees and beyond, to where you fully understand yourself. And that's what makes you present. And a lot of people are not present these days.
No.
That's why I say on my show, when you live in the present, there's always an opportunity for a new beginning, because by being present, being present gives you an opportunity for a new beginning on anything you're doing in your life. And you get to really enjoy and embrace everything that you're experiencing. Like when you go to the airport and you don't have those hiccups, because you create your reality. You give attention to what matters to you, opposed to giving attention to what the status quo society wants you to pay attention to.
Yeah.
That's all I want to say.
But we also have a choice in how we react to different situations.
Absolutely.
Too. So every time I travel, going back to that as an example, whenever I leave, I leave and I go, well, I'm supposed to arrive, for example, in Denver tonight. I might arrive, I might not arrive. We'll see what happens. And having that kind of mindset, on the onset, just kind of like decreases any kind of anxiety or decreases any kind of like expectations, because expectations are always the mother of suffering. And So you can hope maybe to arrive, maybe, but if you kind of like get it, if you set out with an attitude of like, this is an adventure, we'll see where we end up. And then wherever you end up is going to be the perfect place.
Right.
So part of it is just also kind of being aware, having that self-awareness to go, you know what, we live in the world and the world isn't a perfect place, meaning perfect, like, I'm going to get everything I expect. And
that's correct, sir. It's filled with uncertainty. It is.
Yes.
Something that is interesting. It made me think about what happened yesterday. I went to the jewelry shop to get some work done on something, and they had a little sign that said, "Please be patient. We're working as fast as we can to attend to you and resolve whatever or to provide you with service." I forgot. I'm just paraphrasing. But what I saw in the littler print, and I was like, that should be bigger print, is that it says, "Relax. We're not in control." Meaning like we really not. Like that's the problem too, is that people want to control everything. And when you realize it, when it comes to God's plan, the creator of that which is and always will be, the universe as a whole, the universe is in control and you're just a part of it. And when you really start to embrace that, it really brings you a sense of peace to be like, listen, I'm not in control. The problem is, and this, many people want to be in control of everything in every aspect, not only of their lives, but in other people's lives.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. There's a quote my business partner has, and he's kind of moved into creating art.
Okay.
And he's done this whole art series called My Comfort is Non-Negotiable. My comfort is non-negotiable.
Wow, that's great.
It's very powerful and it's very yogic. Because so many Americans, specifically, I'm going to pick on Americans, but...
Oh, listen, pick on Americans as much as you want. Plus, you're a Canadian, so you can. Pick on Americans as much as you want. Because listen, I'm American, born and raised, still here, fighting the good fight for love, peace, and light. And, when it comes to America, you should pick on them because sorry to cut you off, but I have to say this because this is something I promote a lot. Americans really think that they're the bomb. They really think that they're special. They think that they're better than everybody else. That's a lot of reasons why they wind up missing when they go to some place like Costa Rica if they don't go into the right neighborhoods. Yes. Right? So they have no respect for the world because America is a very egoic society. It edges the very essence of who you are out of you. And it makes you into this narcissistic, self-fulfilling, self-worshiping prick. Yeah. And I think that with the pandemic and many other things that have passed on in the recent past and the last couple of years, America has been exposed for that and for what they truly are. So people are not really looking around the world as America being this powerhouse and so great. It's like, oh, people from other countries like, you're not that great like we thought we were. America's good at marketing themselves to be great, but it's just a lie. So they're just good at lies. That's why we have Hollywood. We have the master liars. We got people that pretend to be something they're not and make it believable. And that's what America is. But go ahead, brother. I mean, it's something I'm very passionate about. It's not that I hate Americans. I don't hate myself. I just understand that we, in the way that we operate, opposed to the other places around the world, even in Canada, people are more self-aware. And it shows. It shows in their demeanor. It shows in their character. It shows in how they treat others. And I'm not saying that, I'm pretty sure everybody's got problems and there's chaos all over the world. But America is the one that thinks that they're better than everybody else. So it's like what I call the capital country of narcissism. We're the narkety narcs of the narcs.
Well, I was just saying, like, I think it's just so part of American culture, more so than I anywhere else that I've ever seen, where my comfort is non-negotiable. And we see that. I see that a lot with people who come to my yoga retreat, and then people that I bump into, and it's not my fault; it's somebody else's fault. And so.
Listen, I'm just laughing. Hold on a second. It's not my fault. It's somebody else's fault. Let's give him a round of applause for that. Listen, let's just call it what it is. That's what Americans do. You know, it's
Yeah.
like, I'm going to point the finger at you, but I have 3 fingers pointing right back at me.
Yeah.
And that's what we talk about at the church that I have, or not that I have, but that I'm a part of, called the Body of Christ Church, where it's like they teach repentance. They don't even focus on really much of anything else, because they're like, you better look at yourself in the mirror before you start judging others, before you start looking at yourself like you're special when you got all this filth and things that you need to clean. You need to go take not 1 shower. You need to take like 3 or 4 showers a day to get all the filth off of you before you even think about criticizing somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah. You're preaching to the choir there. So I don't remember why we got onto this topic.
No, that's okay. I'm sorry if I
we swayed so far from where we were.
Let's bring it back, because this all goes back to self-awareness and having that peace of mind. So what we're talking about is AYAMA. What is it that you discovered in these techniques that you've developed through time and still developing as we speak, right? So as you're evolving into these different techniques of AYAMA, if you could just kind of expound more on how this is going to really help people that want to get into yoga, can get into your type of techniques so that they don't make the same mistakes that other people have gone into yoga where they get injured. Because I've seen that a lot. People get into yoga, they actually will have an injury that they healed from, reactivated, and the injury becomes far worse than it was when they first had it.
Yeah. Well, it's probably, I agree with you. I've seen that time and time again, that people get into yoga and then they injure themselves. And especially if they come in with an old injury, it oftentimes becomes worse because they've created more instability. That instability comes from the muscles not working in their body. And, you know, one of the things I kind of, especially with men, I did a poll with men recently, and I was like, why aren't you doing yoga? Like, you know, why don't you get into it? And there was a few responses, but one of the overwhelming responses was, it's too painful. And so where AYAMA comes in is the way that I've created AYAMA. It's all about working within your level, or your range of motion is a better word. And so, for example, like if you cross your arms and you're just sitting and you bring your right shoulder to your right hip bone, now you're activating all of your oblique muscles. You know, we're not focusing on improving quote unquote range of motion. We're not focused on stretching. We're not focused on flexibility. It's just simple little muscle activations so that you can start to improve the muscle function of your body. And how is that going to help people? Like we've just been talking about, like stability in the body and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But as I said earlier, one of my main goals, purposes, is to help people become pain-free. Pain is always the result of stress. Stress brings inflammation, and inflammation is what literally starts to affect the pain or creates the pain. It starts to stimulate the pain receptors. If we decrease the inflammation, we start to decrease, the pain right away. And I've seen people become pain-free, like sometimes within minutes. If they have a back issue, we start to get certain muscles working properly. The pain disappears because there's stability in the body. Once we have stability, inflammation just starts to disappear. And I started, I've been studying sort of muscle activation for a while during the pandemic. So about 3 years ago, I started bringing this really into my classes. And as we started opening up and I started having people coming to my teacher trainings, I always consistently saw people, everybody would become pain-free somewhere between day 6 and day 10. People come in with shoulder problems, with back problems, with hip problems. And right across the board, day 6 to day 10, people became pain-free. And that was kind of like the switch for me that made me go, I need to start putting this this out there on a bigger level because, I mean, as I said earlier, I want to flip the script on what yoga is about. So people stop thinking that yoga is about flexibility. We need to get yoga teachers educated into how muscles work properly, how, body function is. A lot of people look at yoga teachers as these experts on the human body. They know nothing. Yoga teachers know nothing about the human body, about how muscles work and about anatomy. And that's also why I call it applied yoga anatomy, because part of my goal is to educate yoga teachers about the human body, but also how do you intelligently and scientifically bring it into your yoga classes so that you can actually start to help people heal properly from injuries.
I'm definitely going to get your book. It's called Stop Stretching, A New Yogic Approach to Master Your Body and Live Pain-Free. Brothers and sisters, I'm going to have a link in the description box for Amazon. You can get it on Kindle for just $2.99, or you could get the paperback for, looks like $16.91, just under $17. And do you do like classes online? Because I know you have your schools where people can actually go and get, take training from you and classes directly. But is there something that you provide, some type of master classes online or anything like that?
Yeah, I offer a lot of things online. People can go to my website, yogiaaron.com, and there's a 7-day pain-free series that they can access that takes people on a journey of the major muscles in their body so that they start to learn how to activate those muscles. I've had several people email me afterwards, say that they're skeptical and they entered it with, a lot of skepticism, but then they started to see how it was working. It's really kind of cool. So they can access it that way. I have a lot of classes in the Yogi Club. I always put content out on YouTube. And so there's a lot of different places that I put content out on, and then also offer live master classes as well. So I would just encourage people, just go to my website, get tapped into something, and then they'll get plugged in to what I'm doing very quickly.
Yep. And I'm following you now on Instagram as well. So I'm going to definitely check out your information. And I'm going to have your website in the description box as well, because, I'm one of the things that the reason why I brought you on the show and I bring people like you is because people like yourself are dispelling the standard traditional things that we've been taught in this long legacy of lies in the world. Maybe I should call this should be an installment of the Legacy of Lies series, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. Yeah, I think on the description page, I'll put it as an installment of the Legacy of Lies series, because I have a lot of different series. So I just basically pick and choose which show would fit into what series, right? Because the series are ongoing. So I think that this show fits into the Legacy of Lies series, because the big lie is that stretching is good for you, and you figured out techniques to show that it really isn't, because the muscles need to be activated off the jump right away, not 25 minutes later when you're getting into a workout or whatever. Yeah. And it's just very interesting because as we have this internet thing, which I think it's a gift and a curse, you see one side being the self-worshippers, which those are your narcissists, and that's the increase in this world. But then you have people like yourself that are teaching people something that is going to give them peace of mind, which having peace of mind in today's chaotic world is having heaven on earth. Yeah. Because even though everything around you is chaotic, it's like what Christ said, it's like that kingdom of heaven is within you. So if you can find that peace of mind within you, you find that heaven on earth. Yeah. And then most likely when you leave your body, you're going to have another heaven as well. So the thing I wanted to mention to you is that, is there anything that you want to leave the listeners with before we end this broadcast that you really want them to focus on and take away from this episode in regards to whether it be AYAMA or just overall their belief systems when it comes to their health and their body?
Yeah, there's so much I could say.
But that's the thing. Aaron, take as long as you want. You don't. It's not like you have to do an elevator pitch, right? Just take as long as you want to give that statement or that message.
I mean, there's a lot I could unpack, but I think what kind of drives me in life There's two things that drive me in life. One is helping people become pain-free, but the other one is helping people to live their purpose or to just live and manifest and live their life purpose. I'm really big into that. I actually have a free affirmation series that people can access as well. It's another one of my offerings. And I just see so many people like walking through life like corks, like wine corks, in an ocean, bobbing around. And then they complain that they're not they're not living their best life. But that power to live your best life is within you already. I like how you pulled that scripture of the kingdom of heaven is within you. There's also another scripture that says, where you find your treasure in heaven is where your heart is. And so that's the place that we need to come back to dwell in. And it's within that place that we find our purpose. And then we have that opportunity to go out and manifest it. So many people have always said to me, like, Aaron, you're so lucky. You have a yoga retreat in Costa Rica. You publish books, you blah, 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 blah. But it's like, I don't know that luck had anything to do with it. I just saw that doors opened and I had the courage to walk through them. And I feel a lot of sadness for so many people because they don't even see the doors opening. But the doors are there. We just need to get still enough to see them and be courageous enough, if you want to use that word, to walk through it. And so one of the little tips I always give people is wake up every day and ask yourself, how am I living my life purpose today? And it doesn't have to be a grandiose thing, but all of those little steps that you take put you on the bigger path. And so when you look back 20 years from now and you go, wow, I really did live a meaningful and purposeful life, during the last 20 years. Now, what am I going to do? So each day we have the choice to live and manifest our life purpose.
So, yeah, that's very well said. Very well said. So, like I mentioned before, for those that are listening to this broadcast, you can get the book, which is called Stop Stretching, a new yogic approach to master your body and live pain-free. I'm definitely going to be checking out your classes, brother, because I need that. I need that pain-free. Not that I go through a lot of pain in my body, but now that I'm in my mid-40s, I'm starting to experience certain pains that I do want to get rid of. And, I'm somebody who takes like 15, 20 minutes to stretch before I start running. I'm not going to do that. When I go run with my dog for a little bit, I'm just going to start running. I'm not going to even try to stretch, and start, practicing some of these things that you teach, and definitely get your book, because I'm all about peace of mind. And if I can find peace of mind in all aspects of my life, especially from within as much as possible, that's what I want, because I'm all about my purpose is, as a messenger, is to remind people that the light is not somewhere at the end of the tunnel, that light is within them, and that they can light up the tunnel and find their way through the darkness, and the darkness being pretty much this world and all that it offers that is unfulfilling. So I want to thank you for coming on to the show, because you brought a lot of great substance to this show, and I'm going to have your website in here. I'm going to put your Facebook link, YouTube, Instagram, and that way people can find you on all these different channels and really get to learn more about your work and what it is that you do with this Y.A.M.A teaching, which I think is really great. So, Yogi Aaron, any final comment that you want to make besides what you said?
No, thank you so much for having me on and giving me the chance to share this with other people. And I just pray that if anybody is in pain listening to this, or looking for other alternatives to live a better life, that they take advantage of it. Know that there's, things out there that are supporting them.
Absolutely. So stick around for just a moment. I'm just going to give a quick, brief outro, and we'll be, I'll get back with you on the line. All right. So I'm going to give a nice, serene exit instrumental for this particular episode. Now, brothers and sisters, I haven't even decided what's going to be the title of this episode. I might even just call it Stop Stretching, Find some peace of mind. Stop stressing, find peace of mind is probably what I'll call it. But I want to just say, brothers and sisters, you know, when you live in the present, there's always an opportunity for a new beginning. Don't look for the light at the end of the tunnel, because the light is and always will be within you. So light up that tunnel and find your way through the darkness. This is Aura the Informationless, saying peace, love, and light. All praises to the Most High in Christ. Barakatah, shalom, and until we meet again, brothers and sisters.